Hey, I've got another great episode here for you today. I'm joined by my friend Shawn Johal. He co-founded the Dolls lighting and LED lighting business in 2009, where he implemented the scaling up growth system and led the company to 3x its revenues well into the eight figures. He then founded his own business and growth coaching consultancy, where he works with entrepreneurs and their teams to help accelerate their growth while finding personal balance and happiness. And so that's actually the topic of our conversation today. Shawn is about to publish his first book, The Happy Leader, which is a business fable. So it's fiction, but lots of practical stuff stuffed into it. So today we're going to talk about Shawn's journey with his own mental health growing up, some of the positive things that he got from when he was younger as a high-performing athlete, some things that he learned from his parents, what his wife helped teach him about expressing his emotion, how Shawn finds ways to embrace the journey and find happiness along the way. We talk about a whole bunch of really fun stuff. I know you're going to love this one, so let's jump in and go and hang out with Shawn.
Welcome to The Mandate, a show featuring intimate conversations about men's mental health, masculinity, and identity. We bring you stories to inspire you, experts to guide you, and the tools you need to become the man you truly want to be. It's time to sit back, relax, and open up. Live from the Mandate Studio in Austin, Texas, here's your host, Adam Hoffman.
Shawn, what's up, man? It is so exciting to have you on the Mandate here tonight. How are you doing?
I'm fantastic. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, you've got a lot of exciting stuff coming up, including a big book launch. How are you holding up personally?
It's a big moment. It's been 8 years in the works, launching on April 6th, and yeah, it's a nerve-wracking moment. Very excited for it. Kind of a deer in headlights right now, not really knowing what to expect, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I appreciated earlier when we were chatting before the show, and you were saying that you haven't necessarily had time to appreciate the moment yet, which I think is so common when you're just like, you're in it, you've been working on something, and all of a sudden it's almost here, and you're like, oh, wow, here we are. Along the way on your journey, has anything helped you stay present and not too caught up in what's happened before or what's about to happen in the future?
I mean, being completely honest with you, I've been so busy, kind of helping clients, coaching, running my own business. I haven't really looked at this that much. And, we're chatting, but I'm surrounded by a lot of amazing authors. And so for me, it was just so normal. I'm having a book and it's launching. But as I speak to people who have never thought about writing a book, for them, it's like a huge moment. And so, it really made me realize, listen, you have to cherish this. How often do you launch your first book? A lot of people never launch a book. The first one's obviously very special. So I'm really just trying to see this as, first time thing that I should never forget, use the memories, make sure that I appreciate every second and not let the moment pass by.
I love it. You're reminding me now that I have a friend, Ed, who has written multiple books, and writing books is kind of like his thing. And now I'm going to go back to him and ask, like, is your seventh book any different from your first book? Like, how do these things change? Like, does this turn into a machine? Like, a salesperson's just picking up the phone and closing deals, and Ed's just out there writing books, or does it still have that same special feel to it?
I'd
So
love to
find
hear
out.
what he says to that because, when you're an author, I can imagine, maybe things come a little bit more natural to you. I'm not a natural born writer. I had to put a lot of effort. It was 8 years in the writing, a lot of edits along the way. But I would imagine that, someone who's used to writing, for them, it's maybe a little bit easier. For me, people have already asked me, oh, you think we're going to write another book one day? And I have no idea. I said, maybe, but the amount of work that went into this, I'll have to see if I have the bandwidth to do this again.
Yeah, I hear you on that. Well, we're going to get to your book eventually. And since we're here today to talk about happiness, we're going to meander our way and get there eventually. But since this is the mandate, it means we got to get into vulnerable, intimate type things. So I'd love to just jump in and hear about what has your personal journey been like with your own mental health?
There's a lot of different elements to that. It's a big question, Adam, and it goes way back. I came up growing up in an immigrant family. As you can see from looking at me, I'm Indian background. I grew up in a very French area, which was actually quite challenging. People don't realize there was actually quite a bit of racism that I had to live through my youth. Just put it in perspective for you, when I got into seventh grade, there were 1,300 students in the school. I was the only Indian person, and there were two, people of African American descent, and that was it. So we were three immigrants in a school of 1,300 people.
Wow.
So it was incredibly bizarre, and it shaped me in many ways. It made me learn to have thick skin. People were coming into there. I used to get asked really bizarre questions like, "Oh, are you going to steal us and take, a girl back to your country?" And I
Oh
was
my
like,
gosh.
"What is going on here?" I'm just like you. I've been living here since I'm 2 years old. I mean, I immigrated to Canada when I was, two and a half. So I feel as Canadian as the next person. But I was very unknown because the culture is not recognized. Really, people don't. There's not many Indian people in Montreal, specifically because of the French language. You see a lot more people now in North America of my background, but Montreal specifically doesn't have many people because the language is quite a barrier. So that was, tough growing up, and it really changed my perspective on things and probably made me a little defensive in many cases. I'm someone who's a happy-go-lucky guy, but I got put into a lot of situations where I felt defensive and that I had to be, a little bit more careful, I felt, around people of what I said and how I reacted to things, because that undertone of racism was often there for me. So, it is something that shaped my life along the way. And on top of that, I had a father who, wonderful man, grew up with, a very tough upbringing, having gone from India to England. And when he was living in England in the 1960s and 70s, he faced tremendous racism.
Mm.
His father, my grandfather, was an alcoholic. He died of alcoholism when he was 62 years old. Very rough on my father. My father kind of used that type of parenting with me, that tough love. So it was tough, for the first couple of years. I got my father who's, using kind of the tough love that he learned from his Indian father. I got the racism going on one end as well. So, there's worse situations for people, but for me, it really shaped who I am today, I can tell you.
Yeah, I mean, those two things are two very powerful forces. So can you think back to when you were younger? Was the idea of, taking care of what's in between your ears even a thing, or was it just get through, push forward, be happy, go lucky, and it's all going to take care of itself? Like, how did you work your way through that?
Yeah, I think my mom helped quite a bit. She was someone who was always that grounding force. I know we hear that a lot, these incredible mothers that people have. I have one of them as well. And I think she was really a stabilizing force to make sure that I kept, that positive attitude. She's an incredibly positive person. So I think she taught me to just stay positive through all of it, understanding that it's just unknown to people. They don't really know, they don't really understand, and they'll figure it out eventually. So I think she helped me quite a bit. But I think I used sports a lot. I was playing elite sports. I played competitive soccer my entire life. And I really feel like I channeled a lot of my teenage rage and all this, these frustrations that I was feeling from, society's pressures. And I think I channeled most of my energy into that. And that was very, very positive, honestly. Got an opportunity to win a national championship when I was 16 years old. I was able to captain that team. So I was developing my leadership skills along the way. And during that process, we had a coach who actually taught us very technical details of visualization. So he taught us how to visualize our victories. As a matter of fact, bit of crazy story. We were, 16 years old, and that season, our coach would have us show up at every game 2.5 hours before the game time, which is for 16-year-old boys who are, only thinking about one thing. And you know what that is. Getting to a soccer game that early was crazy. And he would have us take off our shoes, rain or shine, and spend 45 minutes just walking barefoot around the field. And he said, I want you to get a great feeling for every, strand of grass on this field. And I want you to picture yourself playing incredibly well today, helping your teammates, being the best player possible. And then you're going to perform that way during the game. And, that's something, when you learn that at 15 and 16 years old, shapes you for the rest of your life. So I think getting that mental fortitude of learning how to visualize at an early age definitely paid a lot of dividends for me later on.
Wow, that gives me a whole new context to, I think, what we'll have time to talk about in a little bit is maybe where this idea of high performance mindsets started for you, at least.
Absolutely. I definitely came from there, for sure.
How do you use visualization today?
I'm obsessed. It sounds maybe a little bit crazy. I do so much visualization. It's funny. My daughter, who's 15 years old, she actually does a ton as well. And she gets it more from YouTube than from me. I wish I could take credit, but I don't. She doesn't listen to me at all for that stuff. The reality is that, I use visualization in my business career. I use it for, everything that's kind of working out, things that are still in my performance. I still run marathons. I still do triathlons. So I use it a lot in that situation. And I'll use it every single morning just to shape my day. So, typically when my morning starts, what I do is I just get onto the side of the bed and I just do one type of very specific stretch. And during that stretch, I'm really thinking, okay, what is my intention for the day? And I really try to visualize what my day is going to look like, what I want it to look like, realistically speaking. And so, that really gives me the right footing to start on a positive note. And it really lets me set my mindset where I want it to be. So I'm not reacting all day, but I'm actually proactive with, the positivity I want to bring.
And so when you're visualizing, is it like you're visualizing your every action, kind of key parts of the day? Like walk us through what a morning visualization looks like for Shawn.
Yeah, absolutely. So the key thing to remember is that we all have very different days. I'm sure your day today was very different than what's going to be tomorrow, than what's going to be in a week. Some days we're more of a family person. So one of the key elements I tell people when I visualize, and because I teach this to people as well, is figure out what your superpower identity is that day. Because you're going to have a very specific identity for every single day. Maybe you're a father, maybe you're a brother, maybe you're a business person, you're a leader, maybe you're a volunteer. Whatever it is that you're going to be that day, that is the identity you have to take on. And that identity comes with certain superpowers. Maybe it's the superpower of listening. Maybe it's the superpower of being, incredibly creative. Whatever the superpower is that's associated with that identity, make sure that's what you embody most and try to make sure that you're pushing that out into the universe as much as possible that given day. So it really has a lot to do with the identity, what is coming for the day. And, I'll give you an example. When I do a coaching session with a client, we're going to be with 8 members of their strategic team. I know that I need to get them to build this amazing plan. Well, then my superpower identity for that day is to be, an incredibly impactful coach. And so I say to myself, okay, you need to be very impactful. You have to be the best coach possible. You have to lead this team to kind of their promised land. So, that's the visualization that I take on. That's the identity that I take on. And you have to also be able to shift between identities, because a lot of times, that day ends and then I shift to going to be a father, and a husband for my wife. So, I can't take on that same identity as I had all day when I'm challenging my clients and really trying to get them to their vision. If I start acting like that at home, you can imagine what kind of reaction I'll get. So you have to be able to shift your identity as you go along and trying to find ways also to especially shift the identity from one action to the next, which I think is very important and most people don't do, right? Typically, when you're finished your day of work, a lot of people bring all that heaviness with them into their personal lives and it just continues. And I find that's one of the most important things to do for sure.
Yeah, you just reminded, well, you made me think of 2 things. One was a visualization of like Superman. He's walking down the street, Clark Kent, businessman, all of a sudden he's got to go be a superhero, opens the door, quick change, comes back out, superhero. So like that's now my frame of reference when I'm going to think about superhero shifting throughout the day.
I love it. I love it.
And then the other part was, yeah, I just flashed back to when I had a therapist and we were working and it was like end of the day, super stressed and wasn't proud of the way that I was showing up in my relationship at the time. And she gave me just a quick 5-minute meditation to do that allowed me to kind of close one chapter and open up the next and walk out fresh and not with all that baggage, which I think, at least for me, I'm not always present to. There's always, it's easy to kind of go through the day and have the stuff kind of line up. And then by the end of the day, you're just sitting there exhausted and it's tough.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you. And I love the fact that you're bringing up this 5-minute meditation. And I've actually been teaching a lot of my clients a 32-second meditation. I actually learned this from Sue Schwartz, who's the founder of Unplugged Meditation, a really cool app. I don't get paid to mention that, by the way. She's just a good friend. But she taught this meditation where really it's 2 times 16 seconds. And it's like box breathing. All you're doing is you're breathing in for 4 seconds, you hold for 4 seconds, you exhale for 4 seconds, and then you hold for 4 seconds. And you do that twice. And just that 32 seconds is enough to release all the tension from the shoulders and the neck, because that's where we keep all of our tension. And then you can go into your next activity. I make a lot of my clients do that when they come back from a break. So we're doing a session together. They'll go to break. Now they're looking at their phones, they're looking at emails, they're calling people, they're getting stressed out. And they come back to the meeting and I'm expecting them to have focus and, not be distracted. It's almost impossible. So I just tell everybody, okay, we're going to just get recentered. If I told them we have to do 5, 7, 10, 15 minutes of meditation, they're going to look at me like I'm crazy. When I tell them we're just going to take 32 seconds, anybody can digest 32 seconds. And so it's a nice little way of doing it. So I love whether you have 5 minutes or whether you only have 32 seconds, there are ways to transition better for sure.
Got it. And so it would be in, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4. And then
Exactly.
You do that for one more cycle, and that's the 32.
And that's it. The only thing you want to tell people when you're showing them how to do it is make sure right off the bat that they're being conscious of taking away pressure from their shoulders and their neck. Because if they're doing it like this the whole time, which most of us are often kind of, a little bit tight. So if they have that conscious motion of saying, okay, loosen up, relax a little bit, get the shoulders down, get the neck down, and then do it, it right away relaxes the temple and makes everything a little easier.
Okay. All right. Well, there's at least one good tidbit already. No, we've got two. We got visualization, we got the 32-second meditation, and I don't know, we're less than 15 minutes into this thing, so we're cruising.
I love it.
So 16-year-old Shawn is winning national championships. He's visualizing and really getting the feel of the field underneath his feet. And Shawn grows up, goes to college, starts a business, starts a coaching practice. I mean, it sounds like things never go wrong for you.
This is one of the craziest things. It's so funny you're mentioning that. I was talking to someone last week and we were talking about the journey, and the ups and downs. There were definitely ups and downs. There wasn't just this incredible upwards journey. We lived through, what I can only describe as one of the worst possible family bankruptcies you could ever imagine. I was part of my family business. It was my in-laws, and so it was my brother-in-law, my mother-in-law, my father-in-law. They had started a lighting business. They asked me to join after, I went to university, I had a couple of years in the corporate world working for Rubbermaid, and then I joined the family business. I wasn't part of ownership, but I was part of, sales and really helping run the business overall. And the business had exponential growth from 0 to 50 million over 6 years through mergers and acquisitions. And within 1 year, when the recession hit, bad company purchase, a few other, challenging decisions, the entire company just came crashing down. Literally 50 million to nothing within a year. So, I would say that was an incredibly challenging time for us where, again, that mental fortitude and really being able to pick yourself up from the ground and start from scratch. That I would say to you would be probably the most challenging moment I lived, especially from a mental health perspective, because it was draining. It was draining knowing that your amazing clients, I'm a client guy. So all I'm doing is making sure my clients are as happy as possible. Now I can't serve them anymore. I literally cannot deliver product to them because the company can't afford to pay suppliers anymore. And so I'm calling clients saying, listen, you're not going to get your orders. We're back ordered. I'm sorry. When is it going to be? I don't know. I don't even know when we're getting this stuff. And they start seeing the writing on the wall. That was really tough, to not be able to have a lack of influence on a situation where you're really subjected to something that was a little bit out of your control. And all you can do is, try to make the best of it. But there really is no best. There's literally was no shining light at that point. It was 1 year of hell. That really changed things. I remember coming back one day from work, and I'm a high energy person. I really am. And it was 6:15 p.m. and I got home and I told my wife, I have to go to sleep. 6:15. It's not like I didn't have an all-nighter the night before, nothing. It was normal. I said, I have nothing left. Like my tank is absolutely empty. And I slept from 6:15 till 8 the next day. I slept literally 14 hours. I've done that twice in my life. And, that was, an eye opener and realizing that I was in a pretty unhealthy spot mentally at that point, for sure.
And so you realize that you're in this unhealthy spot. What happens next? Does it just get better magically, or were there some things that you put in place?
At that point, I started exploring meditation a lot more. So I remember in that super tough year, ran a marathon and took up meditation for the first time. So for me, doing long distance endurance sports has always been an incredible relief. As crazy as it doesn't sound very, relaxing, just getting out there and running like 30 kilometers, there's a lot of American, viewers, I'm sure, but there's, 20 miles and just hammering that distance out. And, where you're alone and you have your backpack, you have, some snacks and some water, and you're just going, right? You're going far because it's no longer being close to home. and you're on your own and no one's really there bothering you. And you really have a lot of time to think and work through things. So I've always used the power of sport. For me, I really feel exercise sport is something that people should be using incredibly all the time. I work out 6, sometimes 7 days a week. For me, it's just a big relief. So that was, one thing that really kept me going during that time. And then, meditation that's when I started. It was, 2008. I started looking into it a little bit, took a course online and just started exploring and understanding what it was. I had tried it much earlier in my younger days, but it never stuck. I think you do hear people tell those type of stories. I had a lot of books on meditation because, being of an Indian background, there are in the Indian culture, between yoga and meditation, there are quite a few scriptures and things written about this. So I did read a few things about it, but I had never really tried it. So in 2008 was really my first go at it. Started realizing that it was, bringing some benefits. But I'll be honest with you, that year, every time we thought, oh, okay, things might be looking better, there was just a new bad, news around the corner that we would find out. So nothing really got better until the company actually closed. And then we had an opportunity to buy 3 of the divisions and start from scratch. And then there was a whole new journey that started at that point.
Well, you're making me think of something that you said earlier and you just said right now is about the journey. And I find that so often we find ourselves falling into the trap of looking at the story that gets told about people, right? Which usually has a nice up and to the right trajectory. But when you're in it, I mean, some days it just feels like you're just bouncing from highs to low. And then sometimes you're just stuck on the bottom and other times you're riding high. What helps you find the right harmony or peace kind of in the natural ups and downs of our journey through life?
Yeah, it's a great question, Adam. I've developed this concept and it might not sound that sophisticated, but for me, it's made a huge impact. And I call it the time anger gap. Okay. It's something very specific that I look at. And I got this, concept a little bit from the Dalai Lama. And the reason that he taught me so much is that they interviewed him once. I was watching an interview on TV with him. And the interviewer asked the Dalai Lama, said, how is it that you have such incredible control of your emotions that you're never upset? You're never mad. You're always just smiling and helping people. And you look like, everything's just wonderful all the time. And he I don't know if you've ever seen the Dalai Lama in an interview, but he laughs a lot. So he was laughing and laughing. And he told the interviewer, he said, you think that I'm never mad. He says, I travel the world and I see children in slavery. I see rape. I see war. I see death. I see hunger. I see all the worst things you could ever imagine in the world. And you think that doesn't affect me. He says, I spend my entire life angry. I'm angry every moment of every day. But he says, I realize that by staying angry, I can't help people because then it's not an anger that you're actually going to be able to have that love and compassion and actually make a difference and an impact. And it was just this concept where I started realizing bad things are going to happen in the day, right? You're going to get cut off. You're going to get a nasty email. A customer's going to be upset. You have a fight with a friend, whatever. Things happen. Life happens. And then you have a choice, right? You can be mad for a year. We've seen people be mad for decades, by the way, right? You can be mad for a decade. You can be mad for a year. You can be mad for a month. You can be mad for a week. Or you can be mad for a day. Or you can be mad for an hour. Or you can be mad for a minute. Or you can be mad for a second because you're going to get over it. You're eventually not going to be mad about that situation anymore. It's very highly unlikely that you'll stay mad about that one situation. I challenged someone who got cut off by somebody 2 years ago to tell me what the color of the car was and who the person was in that car who cut you off. You don't know. The next day it's over. But the thing is, we stay mad for a really long time. So I try to explain to people, try to reduce the time anger gap to the most minimal amount possible. So that when something happens, first thing you tell yourself is, I will get over this. I am going to not be mad at one point. I'm not sure when, but I will be over this. And ask yourself, well, why does that have to take time? Why can't you reduce the time that it takes? Maybe you don't need 2 hours. Maybe just take 2 minutes, go take a walk, do the 32-second meditation and get over it quickly. And so for me, that's been an incredible tool that I've used along the way. And, I have young kids and now they're into young teenagers and, they know how to push my buttons. My son really knows how to, he's one of the only people who knows how to get me mad, and he can do it multiple times per day. But the difference is that he does it. I'll really get mad about something that he'll do, but literally a minute later, I'll say, okay, it happened. It's done. Let's move on to the next thing. And I try to teach people that. I say, just move on. You're going to get over it. So why linger? There's no point to linger on it.
I love that. It also makes me think of how much more impactful or salient our negative emotions are as compared to our positive ones. Like you're saying, you have to choose to hold on to that emotion for a long time. Sometimes we don't necessarily have a choice. And that's a whole other conversation. But if it is a choice, like somebody cuts you off and you're going to go be mad for the next however long it is, like that's your choice. And we can hold on to those negative ones so easily. And yet something like happiness or joy or love, they're just so easy to let go of. It seems completely backwards.
Yeah, I really think it is backwards. And, if you follow people like Joe Dispenza, who's getting very popular these days, and people who really talk about emotions, I personally was taught very specifically not to have emotions. Like my father made it very clear to me that any sign of emotion was a sign of weakness. He taught me that for 20 years. Says you never cry, you never show emotion, you never show vulnerability. We don't do that. We're men, and we don't do that. And so you get that hammered into your head every day, nonstop. And then you get these emotions that bubble up and you're repressing them, right? You're just pushing them down. It took me a long time to realize. And it was actually my wife who made me realize, she would cry about something. I'd get really mad. Like, why are you crying? Stop crying. You don't need to cry. And she says, no, that's how I express my emotions. I'm allowed to cry. And she told me enough times where I started realizing, well, no, she is allowed. Like, why am I so mad that she's crying? If that's how she expresses herself, let it be. And so, I've had to really learn to kind of re-educate myself on emotions. And one of the best examples I have is that, if you're one of those people who believe in the quantum model and that we're all made of energy, and that you can attract the right energy to yourself, well, it all comes down to how high you can bring your level of emotion. And, I would challenge the listeners to look in and try to do this. It's really, really hard to do for positive emotions. It's really easy for negative emotions. I'm not sure why. Like, you want to just get yourself angry, you can just get angry like really quickly. You can just be annoyed really quickly. But to be able to say, okay, I'm going to bring that feeling of pure joy, or like true, that happiness that comes from the heart and the soul and really comes up to the surface. Try to make that come up. It's hard. I've been practicing it a lot and it's really not easy. So I don't know if that's human nature or the way we've been taught, but you're right, Adam. It's way harder to bring up those positive emotions than the negative ones.
There's got to be somebody that's studying this or has studied it. Now I'm very curious. It's like if you could give one gift to humanity, and that gift is how to turn on positive emotions just as easily as we turn on the negative ones. Like, holy cow, that would just be a lovely gift to have. Like I love to be sitting there when you were talking about anger, and I don't get angry very often, but when I get angry, it's like it comes up real fast. And I'm the anger of, like, when I'm really angry, I feel like the only way to let it dissipate is I want to like break something. And my closest thing to breaking things is like I'll go up to the hockey rink and just like rip slap shots, skate fast, rip slap shots. There's like something about that like impact of like getting it out there that feels really good.
Yeah.
But when I think about that with happiness, love, joy, excitement's one that can come on pretty fast too. But the other ones, it's I don't know. Now I'm wondering, like, if we really hold ourselves back from feeling those, if that's what it is. It's almost this like self-regulation to protect ourselves. Don't get too excited. Don't be too happy about this because it might go away, and then you'll just be disappointed, knowing that disappointment's going to stick around for a while. I'm just like riffing here on the fly, but that's what came up.
Yeah, I think you're right, Adam. I think we are taught in society, like, don't reach too far, don't dream too much. Like you said, don't get too excited because something bad's around the corner. I do think that society has taught us that for some really weird reason, and that we're not. And, we even talked about earlier, the ups and downs. Oh, that's part of life. And, my business partner and I had a big debate about this the other day, because I was like, well, why can't we just be like, as you mentioned earlier, just on this nice upward scale now? Why does there have to be a bad point or a big dip? And it'll probably happen in the business, because that's how, businesses do have ups and downs. But why does that have to happen for you as an individual? Because that down is going to come. So why aren't we able to sustain it? I am lucky, and I'm very lucky in a certain sense. I don't know where this comes from, but I'm saying I'm lucky, but there's a big problem with it, and I'll explain to you why. But I'm very lucky because I have a diagnosed positivity bias. So I actually did specific testing when I went to a global leadership academy. And there's a doctor whose name was Dr. Heidi Hanna. She's worth looking up. She's an incredible energy doctor. She's like legit. if you want to look her up. She's a great friend as well. And she made us go through, there's about 30 entrepreneurs that went to this thing. She made us do testing where we were getting tested on our emotional intelligence and our positivity or negativity biases. And when she got my test results, she came to see me. She said, we're going to sit down. We're going to review your test. And she said, I've never seen almost ever these results. And I said, okay, I was really nervous. And she said, your positivity bias is just, it's through the roof. Like I've almost never seen that. And so I was like, oh, I'm so amazing. I got a positivity bias. I'm the best. And she said, it's not good. And I said, what do you mean it's not good? It sounds like it's amazing. She said, it's terrible. It's not good at all. She says, you should never be on the extremes of a spectrum. She said, it's better that you're on the positivity extreme than the negativity extreme, but she says, you're not at a good place. And I said, well, why am I not a good place? Like, you're going to have to really convince me this is bad. And she says, because you have completely rose-colored glasses at all times. She says, this is not a good thing as an entrepreneur. It's not a good thing as, a father trying to teach their kids things. She says, you have no blind spots. Like you have no recognition of understanding your blind spots. You have no idea what they look like. She says, like, the worst thing will happen. You just think like, don't worry about everything. It's going to work out. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be perfect. She says, you can't go through life like that. It's actually very dangerous. And so I've had to learn to live with that, as a matter of fact, because I realized that I do that. Something bad happens. I just tell myself, it's going to work out. Everything's going to be perfect. And, I think it's a good thing to have a good positive attitude, but you have to be careful. There might be things you have to do, change behaviors, react, that you might not do if you're just too rose-colored about it. So yeah, for me, it's been the challenge of balancing the two, to be honest with you.
That's fascinating. I mean, I get it conceptually. And there's a part of me that is like, yeah, got it. Totally. Yep. That's the one. And then there's part of me that's like, but what's the matter with believing that it's going to work out? And, not that like, oh, hey, I don't have to do anything. And all I have to do is think positive thoughts and my life's going to be perfect. Like, yeah, you have to go and take action. But the fact that you'd even consider like going and taking action and not just thinking and believing your way to happiness, which obviously is an important part of it, that doesn't seem too crazy. Because I guess what I'm thinking about in this example that you gave is like, you've got somebody who, what I would consider way extreme, right? Like they're the ones just like walking around with that shit-eating grin on their face all the time. And you're like, you're either on drugs or something's going on here. And like, you're a happy guy, but you're not over in that realm. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. No, I agree with you. And like I said, I've really come to embrace it, and I'm really happy about having that positivity bias. I think it's really good. And I'm lucky as well, because she said, I do have a pretty decent emotional intelligence. So that, she says, a good combination. She says sometimes the worst mix is the person who has a high positivity bias, but a very low emotional intelligence. Because not only that might be closer to what you're describing, because then you're just going around, everything's great, but you also will never notice if someone around you is feeling pain or suffering or, not doing well. You'll just be like, I'm happy. Don't worry about this person. And you really lose that touch of, of empathy that's necessary. So at least that part's, doing okay for me. But yeah, I think it's something where, to me, the blind spots have become important, as an entrepreneur, as someone who's had, has multiple businesses, has situations, that could be challenging with either clients, with partnerships, with whatever it is. It is dangerous sometimes when you're going into it and all you're thinking is, no, this will be perfect. And then next thing you find out, wait a sec, this was a disaster. I really didn't see that coming because I wasn't looking at the blind spots. So I think for Heidi, she was just telling me, just be aware of your blind. Don't change, but you got to start being more aware of your blind spots, because that could cause real issues for you.
Yeah, a place that it showed up for me, I tend to skew, I think, more on the happy-go-lucky side than most, is when it can kind of rub people the wrong way. And they're like, how can you be so positive all the time? And it's almost like it's offensive to them. Have you come across that?
I have. I try not to hang out with those people. No, I'm just kidding. But it's, I like to be surrounded by people who appreciate my positivity.
They're usually at work.
Yeah, exactly. They really are. Well, as a matter of fact, I work with about 20 different companies, and I got a few Debbie Downers, people who are at these companies. I say to myself, wow, like you are really somebody who just never sees like the positive side of things, and they do struggle sometimes. But, I think normally when someone acts that way, they have their own insecurities, they have their own reasons for being really frustrated. And that's something that I've had to learn to deal with as well, become a better listener, really understand if someone reacts that way to me, to kind of say, okay, well, you're probably not annoyed by me. Like there's probably something happening on your side. Do you want to talk about it and kind of get deeper to their issue? Because, if someone's just going to be annoyed because someone's happy around them, typically it's more of a mirror effect where, maybe they wish they were happier or something's going on that they're having a challenge dealing with.
I'm glad you pointed that out. Is there anything that helps you be more aware of that so you're not so quick to judge like that reaction? Because I know a lot of times it's, for example, hockey last night. There's a kid who was playing who was just being a real dick. And
Mm,
he's not always like that. And so everybody's getting all riled up about it. And I'm like, something's going on for him. But
yeah.
nobody wants to stop and think that something's going on for him. They're just like, why is this guy being an asshole? Like, stop being an asshole.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's probably, we talked about a lot of the issues we have as human beings in this, conversation so far. And I think that's one of the biggest ones. We are so self-focused as a human race. And I don't know where that comes from, but if we're being truly honest, I'd say 9 out of 10 people are thinking about themselves before they're thinking about anybody else. And I'm guilty of that as well. So I'm not pretending I'm, holier than thou. I think it's just this weird, again, natural thing that we do. We look out for our own selves. I think it's that survival instinct. It comes from, millions of years of humankind. But being able to, what I think is train and develop that skill, because I do think this is a skill that you can train and develop, of really becoming just this incredible listener, someone who becomes perceptive to other people and really trying to go deeper and understand with someone else, why they're feeling a certain way, trying to go ask the right type of questions and kind of taking your own ego out of the equation for a little bit and going deeper with that person. That's the way to do it. I think it's hard. It's very hard to do, especially when someone's being a jerk or they're doing something that you say to yourself, wow, like this is just unbelievable. Like they're really being, completely, unacceptable right now in their behavior. But yeah, and maybe they are just someone who just hates the world and they're just frustrated and they're not someone that you're going to be able to change. And it's hard to change people. But at least if you can show that empathy, try to see things from their perspective and say, okay, I'm going to look at it from their point of view. Whether we agree to agree or agree to disagree at the end of the day, that's fine. But at least I'll understand where they're coming from. And, maybe you have to let bygones be bygones and leave it at that. But I don't think we do that very often. I don't think we take the time to say, why is this person acting that way? Like, what is it? What's at stake for them? Why are they so frustrated? Or why are they, taking something out on me? I see it no better place than my teenage kids. I see so many of these specific frustrations and they're taking it out on my wife and I, and I'm thinking, it's not us. Like this has nothing to do with us. This is something deeper that they're dealing with right now. So I see it often.
I imagine that can be incredibly helpful with kids, is not making it about you.
Yeah.
Speaking of family, I want to pull something forward that you mentioned earlier, your wife and the role that she played with kind of opening yourself up to emotional expression outside of herself, just expressing her emotion kind of authentically and not being ashamed by it. Was there anything that she did that helped you express yourself more?
So my wife is going to kill me because I'm not allowed to ever talk about her stories. Like, don't ever talk about me. So, but I'm going to do it anyway because that's just how
Good.
I
We'll
am.
get her on the show
So-
next. I'm going to interview her.
Yeah, exactly. You can interview her. My gosh, I have a lot of things to say. For me, she is, I'd have to say, and I'm sure a lot of people say this about their wives, but I think I'm pretty, able to take a step back with all the introspection that I've done in my life. She's probably the most honest person like I've ever met. Honestly, I've seen her do a white lie to someone, and her face becomes just this weird red color. She starts like hives start breaking out. Like she is not able to tell the smallest, slightest lie ever. She's very authentic and very honest and very true to herself and what she does. So she'll never be fake. If she's really emotional about something or upset about something, I can tell right away that there's genuinely something going on. It's never to get attention. It's really that there's something bothering her. But definitely she was someone who taught me not only about the fact of being more open to feeling certain emotions, but more about acceptance. Like that concept is something that I still struggle with today. And, accepting who we are, where we are, why we are at this place in our lives. She's really been someone who's pushed that idea of, listen, like things are pretty good. Like we need to accept and realize what we have is pretty awesome. So I guess in a sense, it's that gratitude, right? It's kind of, let's be grateful for what we have today. I think she's really spent a lot of time teaching both myself and my kids about that concept.
What has helped you be open to that sort of teaching? Because I know as men, sometimes we can be, as you mentioned, so quick to reject that because of the way that we were brought up or the male role models in our life. What has helped you be more open to those more, let's call them feminine things, is what people tend to call them.
Yeah. The only thing I can point to is my mom's side of the family. Honestly, I'm a lot more like my mom's side of the family. My mom is incredibly sensitive, incredibly emotional, and her brothers are very much like she is. They're much more open-minded, whereas my dad's side of the family are kind of the warriors. They're all like bodybuilders. They're all just like these really tough people. His sisters and brothers, all of them, they're just like a tough family. And so it's been a need for me to shift, kind of more towards my mom's family's way of thinking, which has a lot more softness to it, a lot more acceptance, a lot more of this idea to be open-minded with an open heart. Can that be learned? Again, I think it's a debate. There are some things I think that are intrinsic in the way you do things. I mean, I've had a curiosity for life. I've always wanted to be, the best leader possible, be someone who does, develop those listening skills. I've been obsessed with that. I've been subjected to some of the most incredible leadership trainings that have ever existed, right from my Rubbermaid days when I worked at Newell Rubbermaid, pretty big $8 billion company. They sent some of the youngest leaders in the organization for 3-4 days at a time of leadership development and, presenting, being vulnerable, really going deeper into, that personal development. And so I got to learn that from a young age, and I started reading a lot about those concepts. And so I think I learned from a lot of people like Robin Sharma and, Anthony Robbins, who's made a, big comeback in the last couple of years as well. And people like that, it's okay. It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to be open-minded. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be emotional, whether you're a man or not. Like learn to accept those feelings and don't be embarrassed by it, and stop worrying what people think. I think that's, one thing that we do way too much of. It's that fear of judgment. My Lord, it's just bizarre to me of always worrying like how people perceive you. I think if you can get over that hump, then you're usually well on your way to having, a much more open-minded experience.
Yeah, it's a tough one, man. That it's almost like it's baked into us. But whenever I think about that, I think about when I was a kid, and going back to meditation and visualizations, there have been some when you sit and you look at yourself as a child, and or watch yourself playing, and you go and you meet yourself, things like that always were so eye-opening to me, because they remind me of how there was a time when we just didn't care. We were just being ourselves. We were out in the world. And I was talking to a friend a couple of days ago who was having a rough day, and he's like, I just want to do this and I want to do that. I'm like, well, what's getting in the way of doing it? And he's like, I don't know. I feel like there's all this pressure to make the perfect tweet or send the best email, or if I just put something out there that's vulnerable, people are going to judge me and it's going to come back to bite me. And that's where it comes from, is we start having these wounds almost as we grow up and get older, that make us start putting up that armor of, well, this might hurt me. So maybe I should pay more attention to this. I don't want to be outcast,
Yeah. I think in 2021, I think we can all agree that that's gone to an extreme now. I think, social media, I see with my teenage kids with TikTok and, Instagram and YouTube and everything going on out there, and Facebook and LinkedIn, it's obsessive. I think we get really obsessed with it. We get obsessed with branding ourselves. We get obsessed with how people view us. I think we were pretty obsessed, in our younger days too, 15 to 17, 20 years ago. But I think it was different then, because we didn't have, these tools completely ready at every single moment. And, I think it's even hard for us to imagine what teenagers are going through today, because they're facing it on an even deeper level, where they may make one mistake, and if it's caught on camera or film or in a picture, that could just be, broadcasted forever, really. And so on social media, and that could destroy lives. So I think it's really a learning thing, where teaching people to turn off technology at times, if it's possible, and really try to separate yourself. We're seeing people, pretty powerful people sometimes, disconnecting from all social media. One of my favorite soccer players, Thierry Henry, who was coaching the Montreal Impact recently, a great soccer player from France who played in England a long time. He just quit all social media altogether because of all the racist abuse, and said, what, I've got millions of followers and it makes me a ton of money, but you know what? I'm taking a stand for all you people out there, you losers in a sense, that are behind the screen, tweeting and then sending nasty messages and making terrible remarks about, colored people. It's like, come on, you're just hiding behind, again, I think that's an internal thing. I think you have massive issues if you're out there, sending nasty things, anonymously in the World Wide Web. But I think sometimes you got to take a step back and just say, I'm not going to get sucked into this game. Really, is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, all that stuff is just so nasty, and I'm with you. It definitely feels like one of those things where it's not me, it's you. Like, you're doing
Yeah.
this, you need to be looking back this way, but you're also,
Yeah.
I think, transitioning us nicely into this emotion that can be so elusive for us because we're so busy judging ourselves, judging other people, is that finding happiness can sometimes feel impossible at times. So I'd love to hear from you, given that you just wrote a book on this. How do you define happiness?
So let's go back to happiness and the word and the name. And, the book is The Happy Leader. And people ask me why it's called that way. And it's a really funny story. But my grandmother, being of Indian descent, in our culture, grandmothers name their grandchildren, and they use kind of a religious book. And I'm the least religious person you'll ever meet, to be honest with you. But she just opens a page and you got to pick the first letter that comes with it. And it was the letter S. And so you think that's for Shawn, but it's not. Shawn's my second name. My first name is actually Sukraj. And, when you see the book, it's actually written Shawn Sukraj Johal. I included it on the book. And Sukraj in the Indian culture, Suk means happy, and Raj means either a king or a leader. And so the happy leader actually comes from my Indian name. That's actually where the title came from. And so I don't know if it was, yeah, it's pretty cool, actually, right? So I don't know if the fact that my grandmother named me the happy leader, that, I've had this quest, or was it a destiny thing where she knew I was going to be happy? And so it was a kind of a weird reverse psychology thing. Who knows? So just because of that, it was something that I said to myself, you know what? I think I'm kind of destined to just keep chasing, this happiness, kind of the pursuit of happiness, that Will Smith's movie came out with a couple of years ago. But, for me, happiness can be defined a lot of different ways. I think there's a lot of misconstruction about it. I think there's a lot of confusion, between happiness and joy and the feelings and what you're trying to get to. And at the end of the day, I don't pretend to have the better definition than someone else. I've seen it interpreted in so many different ways. But to me, the one thing that it really does represent is the journey, as you and I talked about earlier, versus the end point. And that's what I get really freaked out about for myself and for so many other people. Because I've come to realize that every single moment of our day, except maybe right now when you're in like the middle of a podcast, or when you're really doing something where you're just truly in the present moment, which, by the way, is estimated by scientists that we're at 5% of our day in the present moment. 5% out of 95% of a day, which is insane. And so scary. That during them, yeah, it's scary, and it's actually very, very unfortunate. So the second that you're doing something, you're thinking of the next step. So you're thinking, okay, I'm going to go, what I'm going to do for lunch, or what meeting I have at 3:00, or where I have to go tomorrow, which we do all the time. I think you probably noticed that as well. You're no longer in the present moment because you're thinking of a future moment. And that means that you've lost, because that moment's fleeting. And so you're just constantly losing the fleeting present moment. It just keeps disappearing and disappearing as you keep moving on to the future all the time. And, when you get to that next activity, you're already thinking about, again, the future activity that's coming next. And so it's really scary for me because I'm seeing and I'm realizing, all the best philosophers in the world talk about this, that, really not being in the present moment at almost any time of our lives. And then you look back and you're like, I'm 42. I'm like, okay, 42 years just passed by. Like, where did those 42 years go? It doesn't make any sense to me. And you come to realize that, we're not really enjoying the moment that we're in. So for me, happiness is really defined by realizing, appreciating, and being in the present moment, and really, taking it for what it is and not taking it for granted.
I like that definition, because I think it's something that it's tangible and manageable. Where sometimes I think happiness, like you said earlier, can be defined and different for so many people. And because it feels elusive, it's like, well, how do you know if you ever actually have it? But if the definition is the one that you gave, then it feels like, oh, okay, yeah, this is happiness for me right now. Like, I'm present, I'm in the moment, I'm experiencing life. Like, yeah, this is it.
Yeah, that's the way I really look at it. And maybe I'm in a bit of a privileged position, because there's been some good moments in business for me, and I'm doing what I really love and I'm passionate about. But I always ask people to ask themselves one question. When you're about to do something, anything in life, is it a hell yeah moment for you? So are you going into that saying like, oh, hell yeah, I feel like doing this? And every time it's a no to that question, you do have to kind of ask yourself, well, why are you doing it? And too many times I see people, well, I just have to, or that's my job, and I say, well, try to figure out a way that the majority of your day and your moments are always in that hell yeah question. And you could say yes to it, that I am actually doing something that brings me a lot of happiness in this exact moment. And the things that don't, and the things that are, there's some things in life that are just neutral, sometimes you just gotta clean your kitchen, and maybe that doesn't bring you the most happiness in the world, but you gotta do it. That's fine. But, there's certain things that you probably really despise that you're doing in your life. And I really encourage people to try to just get rid of those, like, as much as possible. There should never really be in a moment where you're doing something that you just despise and that just brings you sadness or frustration or anger or, complete boredom. Try to build your life in a way where most of the things that you're doing are bringing you some sense of satisfaction, some sense of purpose. I think that makes quite a difference.
I have to imagine that for a lot of people, going through that exercise could be terrifying. It's almost like you need to do it in a supervised fashion, because I've done it a couple times, and when you then end up with your list of hell yeahs and everything else, that everything else list tends to be very long unless you've been intentional about that for a while. And then
Yeah.
at least for me, I reach this point where I'm like, oh God, what is this life that I've built? Like, and then you can go into like a real existential crisis at that point in time.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. I mean, it's very dangerous, but you have to do it, because how are you ever going to fix it if you don't do it? So we call it the love loathe list, right? What are the things that I love doing? What are the things that I loathe doing? And you just got to take that loathe list and say to yourself, okay, I'm sure there's at least a couple of things you could take off there that you could either delegate, that you really don't have to be doing, that you get rid of that out of your life altogether. Figure it out and just start going off that list, maybe once a week, once a month. Start trying to take everything off that list as quickly as possible till it gets empty. And then you know that you'll kind of be living the best life for you. You have to do it. You have to face it. It reminds me a little bit of, people who never want to talk about death. And I think, again, as human beings, we hate talking about death, right? It's, oh my God, like, I'm not going to die, or I don't want to think about dying. But, again, from the Book of Joy that was written, story about the Dalai Lama and Archbishop Desmond Tutu, they talk a lot about death in that book, just as a matter of fact, and that it's coming. And by addressing it, we can actually appreciate every moment much, much more, because we know that it is kind of finite in time, and that, it is fleeting. There will be a day where we won't have that next moment. So make sure you appreciate every single second of your life.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I was going to ask you something earlier about the book when you were talking about it. Oh, and that was, why did you want to write a book in the first place?
It's a great question. 8 years in the making. I'm thinking, why the heck did I write this book? It's very specific, actually, to be honest with you. When I was looking at, I've been part of the Entrepreneurs Organization. I've been surrounded by entrepreneurs for about 10 years now. And what I noticed about entrepreneurs, entrepreneurs are a very funny bunch. Everybody wants to be an entrepreneur. Well, when I talk to people, yeah, I'd love to own a business. I'd love to be my own boss. But then when they become an entrepreneur, they're really stressed out and annoyed like 95% of the time. So I'm kind of thinking to myself, okay, there's something that's oxymoronic about this concept. And when I ask those entrepreneurs, okay, well, when will you be happy? Because you want to be an entrepreneur, and now you're an entrepreneur, and now you're not happy. And they always tell me the same thing. Oh, I'll be happy when I sell my business. I'll be happy when I get that new team member. I'll be happy when I can delegate everything. I'll be happy when I don't have to go deal with these customers. So they have this weird endpoint in mind that's far off in the distance. And often they will get to it, and that action will actually happen, and they're not any happier than they were before. And so it really made me realize to say, people don't seem to be happy in this, symbolic, somewhat fictional point in the future where they're expecting to be happy. And so what can I do to help people find happiness immediately? So find happiness in the present moment, find happiness in their journey, and not be waiting for that fleeting moment, because I really don't believe that when you get to that point, you'll be that much happier. My mentor has always said it best to me. He says, the myth of selling your business, he says, is unbelievable. Everybody thinks, I sell my business, I'm a rock star, I'm happy. And he said, the majority of the time, and my mentor is 80 years old, okay, so he's seen a lot of things. He said, and he mentors only entrepreneurs, he said, the majority of entrepreneurs sell their business, and they've actually sold a part of their soul, because you put your heart and soul into this business, and now you're selling a part of that. So you're really selling your soul. And that's a reason why so many entrepreneurs are not successful in launching a second business or a third business. the majority of entrepreneurs are not successful the second or third time around. We only hear the great stories, right, of these people who have 10 businesses, but you don't hear the 1,000 stories of people who kind of tried to start a new business and were not successful in doing it, because it's really hard to duplicate, what you did with that hustle at the beginning. So, that was really the concept for me behind the book. It was to say, okay, let me show people how to be, happier, how to take on a different mindset, how to change their habits, how to, change the way they perceive the world, so they can find happiness right away and not be waiting for some point in the future.
And so talk a little bit about what's the format the book follows. Like, it's like a story and practical exercises? Is it how did you write it?
Yeah, so I wrote it as a fiction. So that's, we'll see how that turns out. It was a fiction format. I really love Robin Sharma. I really love Patrick Lencioni. I love the way they write business fables. And so for me, it's really considered a business fable about transformation in business and in life. And it really talks, us through the story of a guy. His name is Ethan, and he's a bit of a, disaster, not really cool with his family. Things are not going well at home. Things at his company are really rough as well. And he's just an overall grumpy person, not, different from a lot of people I meet on a day-to-day basis. And, he finally meets someone who actually teaches him how to become a happy leader. And there's a journey and a story that goes behind all that. And then it takes you to the end where there's a happiness guide that I provide for all the readers, so they can go through the happiness guide and understand what are the steps to becoming happier on a day-to-day basis.
Amazing. Well, I cannot wait for it to come out. What's the launch date again?
April 6th.
April 6th. Okay, so that is from a week from when we're recording this, basically. So we'll make sure that links to get the Kindle version, get the print version, whatever your style is in the show notes, and we'll get it out to as many people as possible so we can be more happy along the journey, as opposed to waiting to get to the mythical peak and look around and realize that there's only another mountain to climb, but first we have to go back down the mountain we just came up, and oh God, can't we just be happy that whole time and not miserable?
Yeah, you can be. Just read the book, you'll figure it out.
I love it. Well, what's one parting bit of wisdom that you'd like to leave our listeners and viewers with?
It's very clear, very simple, and something we don't do. And I don't know why we don't do it. And, you and I touched on it a little bit earlier. I'm going to make it very simple to understand it. Celebrate the wins. Okay? Celebrate the wins that we have in life. For some reason, we spend so much time on the negative. We spend so much time planning the next win, but then the win just comes and we just quickly graze over it and we move on to the next thing. Celebrate the wins. There's so many different ways to do it, but give yourself these goals, these milestones, and then pick something that you really love and find a way to celebrate it. I really love wine. I'm not to say I'm alcoholic or anything, but I love wine. And I have my wine bottles in my wine fridge, and I have a Post-it note on a couple of those for milestones that I'm hoping to hit, one of which is the launch of the book. And when that happens, you pull out that nice bottle of wine, and you drink it and you savor it, and you say to yourself, this was a huge win. Let me appreciate it. Find ways, for the people who don't drink, trust me, that's not the solution. There's other things you can do, but find ways for you to treat yourself, celebrate the wins with your loved ones, with your friends, with your family, with yourself, and make sure you appreciate those, because for some reason, human nature has us always think about the negative, but we don't spend enough time on the positive. And that applies to people in your businesses as well. I see it all the time. People focus so much on their losses in the business. Focus on the wins, celebrate as a group, get your whole company involved, celebrating when a milestone happens and something great occurs. I think it's something we don't do enough of. So yeah, celebrate the wins.
It's simple, it's hard, but it's practical. And that's why I love it. So I know that you passed this milestone a while ago, but I will celebrate the fact that you wrote a book and it is being published. And while the public publishing date is not here yet, I hope that you've celebrated the fact that you at least wrote a book, and it's going to get birthed into the world.
I'm getting there. We'll be celebrating for sure.
And I don't know if you're a Parks and Rec fan, but as Donna Meagle likes to say, treat yourself.
I love it. Yeah, my daughter's got me watching that show. So
there you go. Good stuff. Well, Shawn, it was wonderful to have you on today. Thank you so much for your time, your wisdom, and your openness today on The Mandate.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. It was an amazing experience.
All right, man. We'll talk again soon.
Sounds good. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for listening to The Mandate with your host, Adam Hoffman. It's time to do your part in raising awareness of men's mental health, shifting the stigma, and having a positive impact on someone's life. Share this episode with a friend who could use some support and post it on your social channels. Have questions or thoughts? Text Adam at 512-980-3935. Find more episodes, upcoming live shows, and life-changing resources at mandateshow.com. Your mandate is to take your mental health seriously. Be courageous, stay vulnerable, live authentically. Until next time, y'all.